Do you see it?
Hello,
Yes,
everyone. Can you hear us?
Okay, great.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hello from Thailand.
Hi. Yes.
Hi.
Yes. 56 people are in the room. So yes, let's get started, shall we?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me kick off the discussion by asking the author this question. What was your inspiration for writing this book? And why did you come up with the idea that, yes, it has to be this book with this title? Yes, tell us why, please.
It's actually it's a long story, and I think there were different phases in my career. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. And I would like to thank the ELINET Thailand team for organizing this. It's very dark in Glasgow, and very early for me to meet, you know, about 60 people, but let's see how this goes. So the inspiration for this book, well, I am, for those who may not know me, I'm a lecturer in the TESOL programs at the University of Glasgow. And I only started working in this program last year, September 2022. And then before then, I was in the States teaching at Middlebury Institute of International Studies. And one of the courses that I started offering during my time there as an elective was language teaching for social justice. So the program that I was teaching in, it wasn't a TESOL program. It was a TESOL TFL program. So I had teachers of English, but also I had teachers of Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, you name it. And then there was also, you know, a mixed group in terms of pre-service teachers, like, you know, causes issues, and it's great to have such diversity in the class, but then, like, you know, there's a lot that, you know, you need to be doing as the course instructor to make sure that you address everybody's needs. And this is a small cohort, not like the one that we have here in Glasgow. I think maximum, like, you know, or yeah, like, you know, maximum number of students that we had per year was around, like, you know, 20. So that, like, you know, you really get to work with the students, and you really get to know them and their interests. Yeah. Just mute my voice. Yeah. So I started offering this course in fall 2019, and I didn't have this book, right? So, but my problem was that I struggled to find readings that would be relevant to the students that I had. So when you look at the social justice books from an education perspective, well, there are lots of books around social justice, right? Like, you know, as a theoretical concept. There are lots of books around, you know, race and ethnicity. Like, you know, there are fields, areas, like, you know, working on these. But when you look at the intersection of social justice and education, it's still, like, you know, it's not a new field, but it's still growing. And but there is more emphasis on literacy education and what we call in the UK initial teacher education. I'm still getting to terms like understanding what that means here in this context. But so the books that I found that would be relevant for my learners, it was more about literacy education. But the bigger problem was that the books, they targeted this American audience.
Yeah, I see.
And it was all about, like, you know, like the civil rights movements, and, you know, issues around like race and social class in the States. So as if like, you know, social justice was limited to what is happening in the States, and it wasn't, you know, like people didn't seem to think about, or I understand it, like it's also like, you know, there are different reasons that they, you know, you need to really like, you know, make sure your social justice pedagogy, however you define it, you know, it is relevant to the people that you work with, right? Like, you know, like if I use those books in the UK, they wouldn't. So I understood that, you know, that scholarship, you know, was relevant to that particular context, but it wasn't relevant to me or to my learners, because I had some learners like who were going to teach Arabic. I had some learners who were going to go back to China or Thailand, and you know, it's just like, you know, I needed a more global perspective. I needed like, you know, a book that would be, you know, appealing not to the teachers only in the States, but also like, you know, because that's the whole idea, right? If you want to, you know, change the educational systems, it's not just changing the systems in the States. Like we need to think about how like all teachers can benefit from a resource, not just as a recipe book, like, or not as a recipe book, not as a recipe book, but as a book that they can, you know, look at and think about, okay, how do I apply this to my context? Like, what are the implications of this in this particular context? Oh, like there is this example from this country, which is not the US, and which might be actually similar to my context, because we are going through like, you know, similar things in terms of the political issues. So how do I, you know, think about this? So that was, I think to me, that was the biggest challenge in teaching the course. And I was like, okay, this is not very helpful in terms of, you know, teaching the particular course that I have. So how do I create new materials so that, you know, so that we don't confine social justice education to the States, but also like, you know, widen it. And I think that goes, I know I said like, you know, I don't want to, I am not an expert in like, you know, decolonization. I'm not a like, you know, post-colonial scholar. But I think that's part that this book actually helps decolonize, like in a way, it's decolonizing social justice education from its narrow application as something that's done in the States to like, you know, okay, how do we spread this and you know, help all teachers and all teacher educators all around the world. So sorry.
Sure. Oh, thanks for that. Yes. And are there any questions from the audience so far? Let me see in the chat box. Again, audience can write your question in the chat box if you would like to, or if you have any question, or basically you can ask verbally. And so I've got some questions from the audience as well, if I can read that out. And the next question is, what is your view on social justice, please?
That's a good question. And that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I clarify in the book, that I have a clear understanding of what social justice means, at least for me, because I think it changes from like, you know, context to context, you know, person to person, learner to learner, right? And I there was also, when I was teaching the course and when I talk to like scholars, teachers, there is often, not often, but like sometimes there is pushback, like, you know, they're like, why, like, you know, why you're, you know, using the term social justice, like, you know, it's become a buzzword, sadly, but it's there's also backlash, like, you know, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the word like social justice warrior. So it's almost like, gained this like, negative connotation. But I think it's still a helpful term. Again, like, social justice warrior, I think the discourse around it is more relevant in the Western world. And if like, during my time in the States, I was also carrying out a project in Turkey. And as part of the project, we asked teacher candidates, like, what's social justice? And like there were people who said like that they've never heard of the term before. And that's alarming, right? So like, not even like, trying to understand what that means, but also like, not even hearing or not even like, thinking about the term. So I think the term is really relevant, and I think it's important. I think we should, embrace the term and keep using it and try to like, get rid of this negative connotations around it. But going back to your question, like, how do I define social justice? So I can talk about two aspects. One is the definition, and one is like, what it means to me. And I think I'll start with the second one. So in the book, I also talk about it like, social justice as a noun and as a verb. So when in our daily lives, when we think about social justice, I think what we talk about is social justice as a virtue, like, as caring, as values, as inclusion and like, diversity and equity. But all of that, as much as they sound great, mean nothing if social justice is also not a verb. And by verb, I mean changing the systems, right? If it doesn't matter how inclusive you are or how caring you are, or how many friends like, you have, from different ethnic backgrounds, if you live in this capitalist, racist, patriarchal society, that doesn't mean anything. Like you need to do more than having these values and beliefs. As far as the definition, the more academic definition goes, I've used Nancy Fraser's framework, and when I read her book, and it's a very tiny book called The Old is Dying, but the New Cannot Be Born. So understanding like, what's happening and what needs to happen next. She talks about politics of recognition and politics of redistribution. And politics of recognition is what we think of when we say like, EDI, equity, diversity, or equality, diversity, and inclusion, right? Areas that are more pertinent to race, ethnicity, disability, gender, sexuality, like, it's also called identity politics. So that's maybe a more popular, familiar term to understand politics of recognition. And then there is also another side of, this social justice continuum, what she calls politics of redistribution. And politics of redistribution is more about the political economy, more about social class, and thinking about how we can transform this capitalist system so that, the resources that we have are more equally or equitably allocated. So thinking about universal, healthcare. So there are these, two forms of politics of recognition and politics of redistribution, but they are interrelated. you cannot think about race without thinking about the capitalist system, right? It's actually an outcome. Well, this is debatable, but you know, some people, let's say, see it as actually an outcome of the capitalist system, right? You know, colonialism brought about, you know, issues, you know, not just issues, just the concept itself, race came from that movement. So they are interrelated. Similarly, gender and class, or gender and race. So we cannot see politics of recognition and politics of redistribution as separate entities, but we need to have a more intersectional approach. And that's how intersectionality comes in to the picture, to understand what it means, like, you know, when we think about social justice. Sorry if this was way too academic, but yeah, that's how I define it.
Oh, yes. Oh, thanks for your definition. And I like the fact that the element of criticality in your definition, that you would like to change the system, change the practice, or perhaps practices to a more, perhaps more fair in a way. Okay, are there any questions from our audience? You may.
There are a couple of questions in the chat.
Let me see.
Maybe I can respond to Denchai.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yeah, so when I was teaching the language teaching for social justice course, it was an elective, right? So all my students chose to be in the course, and there were, you know, other students who said, well, there was one student actually who didn't really agree with the idea of social justice language education, but still took the course. I think he was like semi-agreeing. But there, I remember, like, you know, other students saying that like language teaching should be fun, and that, you know, and like social justice is like, you know, too painful or not that interesting to engage with. But like my approach to that question or to that concern is that social justice is not something that we bring to the classroom. It's already there. I think that's my approach to everything. Like, you know, like there is social justice issues even in this group, right? Like whichever, like as long as you interact with the, you know, with others, and like, you know, not just humans but also non-humans, like there is this, you know, element of power dynamics in the picture. So as far as language classrooms go, like we are not bringing social justice. We are just like, you know, social justice is there. We're making sure that we address it in the classroom, and it doesn't mean that language education shouldn't be fun. But like sometimes like, you know, it's just like life isn't fun for our learners, right? Like, you know, so it's just like ignoring the realities of what happens. Like, you know, like if you're saying that, you know, language education should be fun, like you're totally ignoring the pain that students bring to the classroom. And like, you know, not just students, like sometimes like teachers bring pain to the classroom. So that's maybe like, you know, in a nutshell, how I approach that question. That I am not saying that we bring language social justice to the language classroom. It's there. We're just addressing it. We're talking about it, and we're trying to make it a more you know, inclusive, equitable, and maybe that transformative space for all our learners and ourselves as well.
It's great. And also there's a comment on Marina. Deniz, you might like to respond to that.
Yeah, actually, some colleagues in Turkey carried out a collaboration project. I think it was between Turkish pre-service teachers and pre-service teachers in the States. And I don't know the details of that project, but I can find they had a article that came out of that project. But I know the authors are Yazan and what was his name? Okay, I think it's a 2023 article, but I'll see if I can find it and share. But I think, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, Nicola and I are trying to explore as part of ELINET with the larger team, that, you know, how do we establish telecollaboration or knowledge exchange or virtual exchange so that, you know, we can talk about these issues. And I think that the whole idea is that, like, how do you learn from each other? Not just like, you know, I don't want to be the one talking about social justice in Thailand, right? That's a context that I know nothing about. I can give you some ideas, but like you need to tell me, like, you know, what issues that you observe and how you want to tackle them. So I think that's you know, that's really good, thinking about building collaborations.
There's also a comment from Nicola down there.
Yeah. I think Marina might have a follow-up question because she raised her hand. So
now, just a comment that a book will come out with Maria Yazan and others, so on their experiences on telecollaboration. I just wanted to put there as well that the colonial past can affect our students' perception of social justice. And sometimes I encounter resistance to decolonize and to address social justice. For example, I don't know, no apologies to anybody Nigerian here, if there is anybody Nigerian in the audience, but I have students who are 95% international on the Master in English Language Teaching and Applied Linguistics. And they actually are very proud of their colonial past. And to deconstruct that in a social justice and decolonized way can be challenging because it really challenges epistemologies and ontologies. And there is this big tension, the pride of the British past and the colonial heritage, but also the difficulty in breaking away from it. And native speakerism is one point in case, because it always comes up. And, you know, beliefs are not easy to undo. So how do you feel about that? You know, when you find, you just mentioned a case where you found some tension. So how do you approach the challenge? And of course, we don't want to proselytize or change people's minds, but raising awareness can also be challenging.
No, I agree. I think like, you know, that first step, I think, you know, it can be really difficult and there can be like, you know, really a lot of pushback. And I understand that, especially in like, you know, post-colonial context, like, but native speakerism is not, you know, it's pervasive, right? It's not limited to Nigeria. It's like all over the world. Like Turkey is not a, you know, post-colonial context, but, you know, there is native speakerism. It's just, yeah, I understand. I agree that there are challenges. I think one thing that I would try to do, and maybe not, so like, especially I think in post-colonial context, there's the class element to it as well. You know, the elitist group, and like, you know, who has ownership of education or English or other languages, and what, like, you know, what English means for certain groups, and you know, so I think it's fascinating the context in post-colonial context, like to understand the challenges. One thing that I can talk about in relation to that is like how we talk about and think about internalized oppression. So, and that's not only for like, for native speakers or issues around race in post-colonial context, right? If you think about internalized oppression for women, like, just accepting the status quo, or in some contexts, and Turkey being one of them, that like, how like, women like agree that men are superior, and that's that's just how it goes, and proud to be serving husbands, and so yeah, it's challenging. And I think like maybe like starting with this idea of like what does it mean to internalize oppression and how it manifests itself, could be helpful. There is no easy answer. It's just it's complicated.
It is. Also, just to pick up on that, Marina points out, that was a very, very good idea. And then is you put in your book the idea of unlearning process. If you can comment on that, please, or is it anything relevant to the point that Marina raised?
I mean, no, it is relevant, certainly, like, because when we talk about unlearning, we talk about like, unlearning privilege, unlearning whiteness, unlearning, well, I've never encountered like unlearning native speakerism, but why not? It could be. But the thing is, like, after I've written the book and I talked about unlearning myself, I've started to question the concept, actually. So now
Why is that?
so I'm writing another paper on how we should not talk about unlearning anymore. There are several reasons. The quick reason is that unlearning has become a buzzword, and it has been colonized and corporatized and commercialized, and you can see like even marketing sales companies are talking about unlearning to increase their sales. So but then I think the main problem with unlearning is that because I've started collecting data around like what teachers learn from the a social justice course, and then I wanted to see like how or whether unlearning happens. So like my goal when I started the research was, oh yeah, like unlearning, let's like let's conceptualize this, let's find empirical data if I can, and like and talk, because we talk about unlearning, but we don't really know what it means and how it happens, and there are like really no empirical studies to show like this is what unlearning is. And I'm not saying that not everything should be measured and qualified or quantified, but I was just curious to see what I was going to find, and I didn't find much. It's not that I didn't find much, but what I found that even though people accept their supremacy or accept their privilege, or accept their racist beliefs, it doesn't translate into action. Then what's the point of unlearning? Like what's the point of saying that I've learned or unlearned my racist beliefs, but I'm still acting in racist ways? Like it's not helpful. And also the way that unlearning is used in the literature is like unlearning privilege. It's not possible. Like it's not possible that you unlearn your whiteness because it comes with you, right? Like, you cannot change. Like, it's not how you identify yourself only, it's also how other people perceive you. So unless you change the whole society, that like unlearning is not meaningful. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't use it, but I think we need to be really careful in terms of what it means and how we talk about it. The only instance that I found meaningful experiences of unlearning is unlearning internalized oppression. So a couple of my participants talked about how they unlearned homophobia as a gay person. And they said, 20 years I've been out and I've been, living my life as a gay person. And, I've unlearned homophobia, but they said sometimes it still creeps in. So it's not a, zero-sum game in terms of, oh yeah, I unlearned homophobia. I've started unlearning it, and it's very slow. And after 20 years, it's still work in progress. So I feel that, unlearning has become a buzzword so that we don't take responsibility for what we do or who we are, and we are just saying that, oh yeah, as a white woman, I've been unlearning whiteness, but like, but what does it mean? Like, where does it take us? There was one question from Nicola that I wanted to talk about, but I haven't had a chance to read all of it.
Yes. Yeah, you can respond to Nicola's comment. Yes, please.
Yeah, so maybe the quick answer is that the competitor analysis that I've put together, the PowerPoint actually includes which universities have, which TESOL programs have social justice in their curriculum in the UK. In the States, it's much wider, and there is also the tendency that, I mean, there is definitely a shift in higher education towards, towards anti-racism, decolonization, social justice, changing the world, transforming the world. University of Sydney, their marketing campaign was unlearning. I was like really surprised to see that, like, we're unlearning the future. And I was like, how do you even unlearn the future? So, and I think we need to be careful, like, in terms of what we are actually doing. And that's like, that goes into like, what we talked about in relation to ELINET, that there is danger to what we say we do if we are not really doing it. Then it just becomes a branding, a marketing, issue, and that becomes really dangerous and more harmful, right? Like, you're actually causing more harm than doing any good.
Yes, and I guess there needs to be more research on this idea or on this concept. I guess, yeah, more work needs to be done. And would you like to respond to Normala's comment in the chat box, please? That's a very good point.
Yes. So I've talked a lot about this in the book, like reflection, reflective practice, critical reflection, but also vulnerability. And that means like talking about a particular social justice issue is vulnerable, right? Like if you design an activity and tell your students, okay, talk about your identities and reflect on it. And then if you're not doing it yourself, like, you know, what does it say about you in terms of the same power dynamics, right? So I talked about that in the book, that, you know, educators or teachers like need to be vulnerable. We need to accept that we can actually, well, we make mistakes, right? But we need to accept that we make mistakes. And maybe that's, you know, what unlearning should be about, that, like, you know, realizing, yes, like, you know, because we are part of the system, like, again, going back to unlearning, like unlearning racism is not possible, because that means that you're limiting racism to interpersonal racism or microaggressions. But as long as we live in racist societies, and as long as we define racism in terms of structural issues, that, yeah, like that it's, you know, you don't change anything. So, and I think it becomes more problematic than helpful. So I lost track of what I was saying. I got bitten by a cat. I blame the cat. So I think, yeah, there's definitely, like, you know, thinking about like vulnerability and unlearning, right? Like if we acknowledge that, you know, we're yeah, like we make mistakes, but we learn and we try to fix them. And I think that that's really important, and conveying that to the learners is really important as well. I think, Paramat, you asked me a question, but I didn't answer, or did I answer?
Yes, you did answer my question, yes. Regarding the unlearning process, yes.
Denise, we have a student attending your kind of the talk today, and he has a question that is very interesting. Tawi Lab, right? He said that when I post anything online platform, something about English, it always has the negative criticism of my English skills or whatever from social media. As college student, I just want to ask, can you recommend about how to get over those comments in your proper way?
Yeah, I don't know if Nicola has suggestions for that, because I think she works on global Englishes. So I don't know if I don't see, oh yeah, I see Nicola here. Nicola, do you have any thoughts on? I understand the like when I post things on social media, I double read it, you know, sometimes like share it with my husband, and I'm like, you know, do you think this will, like, you know, this will get backlashed, or like, you know, like, so like, you know, I do auto control as well. But I don't obviously, like, you know, comment on others like languages. So like, you know, that's like your question is about something else. But what I would say is that don't change, like, you know, your language, because I think, like, you know, it's who you are, and I would just, like, you know, post the way that I'm posting, and maybe ignore the comments, or maybe, like, you know, if you receive any hateful comments or criticisms, direct them to, like, you know, to our resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? Yes. can I add to Dennis' comment? And this will be my response to the questions. Basically, this is absolutely ridiculous. You shouldn't, comment on someone's language or languages or how they do it, because everyone is governed by what they call it linguistic human right. Basically, all the languages on earth are equal. Yes, and you can't say this language is better than the other one. And if you do that, you have become a racist in terms of language. And that is what we are discussing today. We want to create a community or a conversation that treats all the languages equally. And that is what we are doing here. And that shouldn't really, really happen. And if it happens, just ignore it. Just ignore it. And this is really inappropriate. That's from my own view.
I mean, I think if it's really hateful, then you can report it, whichever social media platform. Yeah. I talked about this in the book, because I don't think it only happens to learners, it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
And there was one comment in our annual program feedback from one of our students, again in the States, and the feedback was that instructors shouldn't wear a mask because it's difficult to understand them, especially if they have an accent or something. And I saw this comment, and I was the only one in the program. I wasn't teaching in person, so it wasn't targeting me. And there was just one other, like, non-native teacher educator in the program. So I noticed this comment, and I reported it, and I said, this is not acceptable. This isn't, like, like we talk about, like, global Englishes and rich English, standardized, Englishes, native speakers, and so on. One of our students shouldn't be saying this. And then, like it really hurt the faculty members' feelings, because this is not okay. And also, like, if they have an accent or something, like what is that something? That's I think that's a very problematic way to talk about one's identity. There was one comment about indoctrination or pushing a social justice agenda, and I talked about this a bit, but I want to, like, reiterate that, like, if people tell you that you're pushing a social justice agenda, open a course book or look at the material and say, there is social justice here. If you are showing these images or these content, this is social justice, and that's, it's there. Like, I think just show them evidence that, like, social justice is embedded in the materials itself. And also I think it's more difficult to convince people that languages are political, but it's easier to provide evidence when you show an image from a textbook, and and we have lots of harmful images, more than enough to convince everyone.
Yes, I like Nicholas' comment that we need to address these things in our network. Yes. Yeah, this is an urgent issue, and this is also a critical issue.
Maybe, like, Nicola, we can come up with, like, a manifesto about, like, linguistic discrimination on the ELINET page, and, like, and I don't know which strand would, I would take this over, but I think like, starting to collate information and resources that then like, people can use, or just like, a blog post from like, from different perspectives, like, and then like if anybody like faces, linguistic discrimination, they can like, share the post and like, okay, read this, leave me alone. Yeah.
And I think we need more research on this topic too, and to make people understand and be aware of the issue, so that people don't turn racist against each other from a language perspective.
Lavinia.
I was going to say that I like the idea of a position statement, because one of the things that comes up is that, whenever you are in situations where something is addressed at you, you have the option either to respond, in which case you take on the burden of educating others, and it's very difficult. And then there's the impact of that message on yourself. So you're kind of in a charged position where you, as you were saying, if we let it go, then we let go and the status quo, and we don't challenge it. But if we challenge it, then it becomes, your individual fight, and it shouldn't be your individual fight. Whereas if you have a statement that you can go to, or something that you can draw on in order to post it in there, then it becomes not only your voice in response, but it becomes a collective voice. And it is a moment where you are educating the others without taking the burden of doing it, on your own. So that approach, I think, is a very valuable one.
Yeah.
Totally agree, yes.
Yeah, and maybe what we can do is that, I know Jason has a question, but maybe we can get it signed by scholars in the field, so that it becomes like, scholars and practitioners as well. So I think yeah. I think because it's recorded, I think it records the chat too. That's my assumption, Mickey, but I can also do a copy and paste at the end. Jason, you had a question?
Hi, I'm a colleague of Yvonne. She introduced your book to me 3 weeks ago, so thank you so much. Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, I think responding to this position statement, I think it's a good idea. I've read in another article saying we can also like refer to some universities' visions, mission statement. Usually, I mean, nowadays, especially university, they should embrace, diversity, justice issues, right? Can refer to that. I think it's a good idea as well. So I have a question on, I think it's Penny Cook's discussion on redistribution and recognition. There is some criticism saying it seems talking about, I mean, some people are saying discussing social justice issues is more on recognition, but actually it's not doing anything in the society at large. So how, I know, I mean, in your book you say actually it's a spectrum. It's not a, one or the other. Yeah. But what's your take on, I mean, criticism saying, okay, you're just teaching language, you're not doing enough for the society on the redistribution aspect. Yeah. It's difficult. I don't know how to answer.
I think we need to well, there are practicalities around, like, the work that you do, right? Like some people, they are more sensitive around issues that surround race. Some people are, they would like to, contribute to the LGBTQ plus community, and some people, have a more political economy approach, and they want to I think first of all, I think we should respect all these efforts, because we need them all, but we also we also need efforts that will combine these and maybe have a more holistic approach. So yeah, there's anti-racism education, but also maybe social justice education that can put all of that together. But I think, to me, the maybe the not the bigger issue, but an important element of it is that connecting the language classroom to the community. How do we build bridges between work that we do in the classroom and what is happening outside of the classrooms? And this is and it's not that difficult, right? We have projects and community work, and students, we ask our students to do assignments that might not be that helpful in their lives. And so why don't we think about the way that we teach, and we ask students to do assignments that might not really help them or help their societies, but actually find ways to connect the school and the community. I think that might actually help us go beyond, oh yeah, you just teach English in the classroom. No, I don't teach English. What I do here has implications for the community.
Yeah, I like your idea of connection. Is good to have students look for opportunities to connect, but they can contribute in the society. Thank you.
Because once you think outside the classroom, then you can actually see those connections and intersectionality better. So it will help that aspect as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm worried about the time, and it's now over an hour. I mean, we said this, we thought it would take only an hour. Is there anybody who we can have one more question then, or one more comment? Is there anybody who would like to ask a very last question? Or perhaps, if not, shall we call it a day then?
If you're, so I don't know if everybody here knows that I'm the strand lead for the language and social justice strand. It's part of ELINET. So if you, I'm going to put my email here. If you are interested in being part of the strand, taking on any active roles, or just be a member of ELINET or of the strand, just email me, and I'll send you the link to to explain how to take part in the strand. And yeah, and then maybe a couple of other resources can put in the chat. Easy. So the social justice and ELT one is our project website of the project that took place in Turkey, and it has lots of resources and readings. And the second one is the website for the course that I taught in California, and it has lots of materials and lesson plans as well. And Paramet, can we put the form link as well in the?
Yeah, the form link. Let me see.
Yeah, and if you have read the book, even one chapter of it, please leave feedback.
Okay. Yes. in the chat box, there will be two surveys, two links to surveys. If you could please fill that in, please. Some of you might have done. The first survey or the first link is about the book. There are a couple of questions there. And there is another survey which is about the satisfaction survey about this event. If you could perhaps fill that in as well, that would be wonderful. Well, it has been a great discussion. So it was wonderful to hear your answers, Deniz. Yes, we were very happy to talk to you. And thanks all the audience for taking part in this event. Yes, and
thanks for having me. Thanks for coming.
Oh, yes. And don't forget, before you leave, please fill in the survey. And we hope to see you when we meet again next.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.